Welcome to the Welborne podcast. We're inviting you to join us on a journey that's been 17 years in the making, which will eventually culminate in the creation of a unique place here in Hampshire. Driven by the vision and passion of a local landowner to create a new thriving community here just north of Fareham, where alongside 6,000 beautifully designed new homes, the region will be enhanced with accessible green spaces, schools, shops, a technology park, and so much more. And as part of this podcast series, I'm delighted to spend some time with some of the key individuals behind the project who are responsible for bringing it into reality as visionaries and creatives who have combined to create this truly unique and one-of-a-kind development. And today in the studio, representing Fareham Borough Council, I'm delighted to have with me Councillor Seán Woodward. Seán, thank you so much for joining us. It's really great to have you here, Seán. Now, for anybody that's watching, I know there's a lot of people interested in this Welborne project in the region, but if they don't know your involvement politically in this region for almost 4 decades, tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay, well, as you said, I'm the leader of Fareham Borough Council, but that hasn't always been so. I came into local politics quite a few years ago. I was elected in the ward I've represented ever since, Salisbury Ward in the west of the borough, in 1986, and been elected every time ever since.
Congratulations.
So, thank you. So I'll have achieved 38 years as a councillor next year, and I've been leader of the Borough Council for the last 25 years.
And why such a passion for you about local politics?
Because I really believe it's possible to make a difference, and people make choices, if they want to go into politics, do they want to go into it at a national level or a local level? And my really firm belief is you can achieve far more locally because the decisions we make as councillors, affect the people we live with and around and our local areas. And Fareham is such a wonderful place, and it's just such a privilege to be able to represent it and bring forward so many exciting projects.
Property development has been at the forefront of the UK for decades now, with there not being enough houses here amongst our islands. And I know that here in Hampshire, there were particular targets that were set back in the early 2000s. And from that moment, in fact, you've been involved in this strategic development that's going to be in this region. So tell us a little bit more about the development of it.
Yeah, it's a long time ago. It's nearly 18 years ago. In fact, it was a different government. It was a Labour government then that put in place something called the South East Plan, and as a part of that sort of top-down planning strategy, we locally, as local councils across South Hampshire, had to come up with what's called the South Hampshire Strategy, and as part of that, that included 80,000 homes over a period, and we had to work really hard as council leaders on that to work out, well, where are these? They're obviously not going to be immediate 80,000 homes.
What was your reaction as a local resident and a local councillor for that target? As you said, it's a huge amount of homes.
It was absolute shock, to be handed a target like that. And in fact, the only part of the South East Plan that did actually survive the inspections unscathed was the South Hampshire part of it, because we put the work in to work out, what are we going to do, how are we going to do it, where are we going to do it, what's the infrastructure going to be, etc. And we sat down and as leaders around a table rather like this one with a map of South Hampshire there, and rather unscientifically we were given the little sticky dots, and each sticky dot was 1,000 homes, and it was where were we going to put them. And I had a view that it would be far better to have a large development rather than dozens and dozens and dozens of little developments in Fareham, because when you build small, you tend to have no infrastructure to go with it. So the roads get clogged, the schools overflow, the doctor's surgeries overflow. So I thought, we need to have this together. We need to have it near a motorway junction, which could be upgraded. And I stuck 10 dots for Fareham, where we're sitting today, north of Fareham, what is now Welborne. And that became known as the North of Fareham Strategic Development Area.
So in this meeting, you've taken these 10 dots, you've put them all just north of Fareham, what would go on to what we now know as the Welborne project. But what was the reaction in that room when you did that?
I think it reminded me a bit of Yes, Prime Minister, a bit where the officer people were saying, well, well, that's a brave decision, leader.
Oh, okay. So I guess there might have been people around you that were more agreeable because you were senior to them.
Well, potentially, yes. And of course, there were other leaders in the room, and they were sticking their own dots on their own boroughs, but perhaps not being quite as bold as saying it would be better to have a large development rather than dozens and dozens of little ones in their boroughs. And in fact, a neighbouring borough leader did stick 10 dots in one place, but that never happened.
So you've done that. Is there any consideration for whose land it is, how we're going to go about creating a new town? Because like you said, at least there's some infrastructure and the required support services needed if you put maybe 100 there and 100 here, but you've gone, right, 10,000 there. How are you going to go about it?
Well, what you then have to do, and that is land ownership blind. We don't think, Fred owns this, stick a dot on and something like that. So it's ownership blind. You're just looking at what you think might work, cause least disturbance to the rest of the borough that you represent. We did consult on the concept, and the people of Fareham, you might say perhaps not surprisingly, the great majority of the borough were happiest to have it up there, because they weren't up there, they were down there. So there was probably a bit of that about
Unless
it.
you're commuting.
Indeed.
And if
yes.
you're a commuter on the M27, then you've got a problem.
Yeah, well then, we had issues and have issues around the M27. That's why there's been such huge investment in it over recent years, in terms of smart motorways, and now, what's going to have to happen there. So that's where we were. So we had 10 dots, 10,000 homes, no name, just North of Fareham SDA.
So then you begin the intricacies, the details of approaching perhaps the landowners, and what were the responses? Not just because this is my land, but I guess also, hang on, you want to put 10,000 homes on top of what is where I live, essentially.
Yeah, so what I did, so the next step really was to invite the landowners in for a chat, and the major landowners were Southwark Estate, which is the Thistlethwaite family. So I invited Mark Thistlethwaite and his lovely father Robin in to see me, and we had a number of meetings, and I can't say, I'd say perhaps a free and frank exchange of views was probably how they started. They were against the idea, and I wasn't surprised that they would be against it. Their family had been involved in ownership of much of the land for centuries, so of course it was important to them. We were looking at a large area, much larger area than we've finally settled upon, and they were very concerned about it. And clearly we had some more discussions required.
Some schmoozing, as to say. Let's talk about that then. The dynamics between the two major landowners and Fareham Borough Council. How did you develop that relationship so that they were brought on board?
Well, we started trying to work together, trying to work a sort of joint venture idea between the main landowners. And it worked to an extent, and we did have a finance company involved as well. It was an organisation called PRUPIM that was part of Prudential, that was going to form a joint venture. That fell away, and I think that exposed some of the issues between us, really. So what we were doing to start with was looking at the land itself and the constraints on the land. And that wasn't necessarily the landowner not wanting certain elements of development, but saying, well, what constrains the land? And in reality, a lot of the land was very special, around the Wallington River, etc. So if we look at the A32 road running up through it, that was in the middle of the land that we were looking at, so approximately equal amounts either side. But when we started to look at the land constraints, which actually fitted in very much with the Thistlethwaite's views as well, we ended up with much less to the east of the A32 and predominantly to the west of the A32.
So I guess the care and consideration that you've had for the land must also parallel with the care and consideration that's been part of Buckland development. So looking at exactly how it can fit alongside the ecology, etc., and whether you disturb the region, and Dashwood as a great site there that people enjoy and want to be able to continue to enjoy.
Yes, and that's why steadily the numbers fell. So we then ended up with 6,500 to 7,500 new homes, plus the business element as well, and then finally settled on 6,000. So a lot of work went in. It wasn't just keep carving the numbers down. It was, we have these constraints, we need these elements of infrastructure, and at the end of it all, 1,000 acres, and what could that support? And it was in quite simply 6,000 homes and 6,000 jobs.
And what kind of work did you do as a council to sway public opinion as well on the project initially before it was even labelled Welborne?
Well, people had seen developments in the area which were really, this is not just in Fareham, but right across South Hampshire, where you add in a few hundred here, a few dozen there of houses, doesn't come with any real infrastructure. It might build a classroom on the local school or something like that, put in a children's playground, and not much more besides. And I thought, well, if we're going to have this quantum of homes, we need to have the infrastructure in place. And that was how we portrayed it to our residents and said, well, so we can go for this sort of pepper pot approach right across the 18,000 acres of Fareham Borough, or we can look at consolidating most of the development, never all, but most of the development into one area where we will have 3 primary schools, a secondary school, several shopping areas, masses of green space, all that sort of thing, improved motorway access. And that was what, by significant majority, the borough went for, the residents went for.
And for yourself personally, it must hugely resonate with you, this idea of stewardship across the Welborne project, as I assume.
Yeah, very much so, because we wanted it to be something special. In the early days, we went down to Poundbury to have a look at that development. And in fact, we went back there not very long ago, and realising that there are mistakes have been made there, and we could learn from those mistakes. We could learn from other developments as well. And just to make it clear that we wanted something really special here, we got the government support to designate it as a garden community. And we were looking at the principles of Ebenezer Howard and the garden cities that were built many years ago, where that stewardship and care for the community and how everything fits in, blends in, and you look at the health of the population, not just the health of the land, were important to us. So and we shared that vision with the landowners as well. But of course, there were several more hurdles to come from the North of Fareham SDA to where we are today.
Yeah, I think for me personally, listening to some of the stories from some of the experts involved in the Welborne project, one that really stands out for me and gives you an idea of the care and consideration is the fact when excavating the project, they found an ancient burial ground, and then they plan on paying homage to that burial ground as part of the Welborne project, whereas perhaps another quick fire buck property developer would just go, all right, brilliant, chuck that in the bin, let's get the house up.
Yeah, well, I think that's the difference between where you're looking here at long-term landowners and the fact that they are also the developers, and they're going to be there, been there for hundreds of years. They're going to be there, not the same people, but for hundreds more. And therefore it's important, because normally what happens is developers find a farmer, they buy his fields, they stick up the houses, and they scarper. And that's how it is. And if they're really mean, they'll set up a management company to leave behind them to fleece the people that live there forever and a day. So that's the norm. This is most abnormal, this development.
I think people out there are probably really glad to hear that. I know many people have these demons with regards to a management company and what's being done to maintain the site, etc.
Yeah.
So I'll be glad to hear that. I know you were heavily involved with the naming process as well, or the council as a whole. So tell us a little bit about that, Seán.
Yeah, we obviously, it's not a very sexy name, the North of Fareham SDA. Where are you going to live? An SDA. Well, that's not very exciting, is it? So it needed a name, and we felt that once we were moving into our new local planning process, so a local plan for Welborne, as it became known, and the rest of the borough, that we needed a name. So we did some historical research locally, and we came up with 3 names, actually. One was Welborne, another one was Swansdale, another one was Spurlings, and they were names with local connections. I had 1 or 2 others as well, but those were the 3 that found their way into the public consultation. Welborne was a series of fields, north of Kiln Road, south of the M27, and the population of Fareham that took a part and took an interest in it, they voted for Welborne, so Welborne it became.
That naming ceremony is a great example of the public consultation as part of this whole process for the Welborne project. Have you got any others, how you've ensured that the people around feel very involved in the development as well?
How do you mean?
Well, just if there was anybody that had opposition to it, how do you appease them? Is there general consultation with a small group, or is it that you go out to the masses?
No, I as council leader, it's quite unusual. I hold public meetings every year. I hold a number of them all around the borough, and I call them community action team meetings. I set them up about 15, 20 years ago, and I stand up in front of the locals, anyone who wants to come. I give a presentation and I take all their questions, whatever it is they want to ask about. So through this process, I did that for our local plan and for what then became known as the draft Welborne plan. So I went out to people, I went into, should we say, I bear the scars from some quite interesting public meetings. You know, I didn't just concentrate on the borough, I went outside into Wickham and Knowle and other places and took some stick, to be honest, you know, as you do when you're, you know, because I've never been afraid to put my head above the parapet and say, well, yeah, this is my idea, shoot me down if you don't like it. So I had consultations. And the interesting thing was, in one or two of those meetings, particularly the ones sort of nearest, I think of Funtley, I think of Knowle, I think of Wickham, yes, there were some noisy people in the room that were clearly absolutely opposed to the concept even, let alone what might come next. And then there were the silent, what I came to know as the silent majority, who would come up to me after meetings and say, yeah, I didn't want to say anything publicly, but yeah, you know, particularly some people in Knowle saying, well, we've got next to nothing here. You know, we've got a community building, we've got a shop, we haven't got a lot else. You know, this is going to bring us schools, shops, open space, lots and lots of really good community facilities, which we'll be using. So once we got over getting general support for the concept, that was really a big part of the battle. So then we could move on to the detail. And it's quite interesting that a lot of those community groups who were, you know, they formed a pretty solid sort of consensus amongst themselves. We oppose Welborne, we want Welborne stopped. Now they are some of the most constructive people sat around a large table, our council chamber in Fareham, where we have our community forum for Welborne, and they're now working with us, you know, with the landowners, developers and the council to make sure that Welborne is the absolute best it can possibly be. So it's a huge, you know, it's winning hearts and minds. I'm not going to say we've won them all, and there'll be those that would rather not have had it, but people are, you know, really engaged, really positive at driving it forward.
We mentioned this off camera, but I guess people want to feel heard and listened to, don't they?
Yes,
and
they do.
I've spoke with Fiona Gray, who is part of the community liaison group here at Welborne, and she has said her door is always open. But I guess it feels the same for Fareham Borough Council. We always want to be able to listen to your concerns.
Yes, that's absolutely right, and people's concerns are right. And we talk about local or national politics. You know, councillors live amongst the people they represent. You know, we're not on some fluffy cloud somewhere where we don't have the problems with, you know, whether it may be schools or doctors' surgeries or traffic or something else. You know, we're in it too.
Yeah.
You know, we live here too.
And correct me if I'm wrong, actually serve the people, right? Is that the word?
Well, that's right. You know, councillors are not employees. Yeah, they don't have, you know, I've had a full-time job most of the time I've been a councillor. You know, we don't receive salaries. We don't get sick pay, holiday pay. If we're fired off by the electors, we don't get redundancy payments or anything like that. You know, you're gone.
Yeah.
So, no, we're there to represent people. And we are those people that we're representing as well. You know, we live amongst them, we work amongst them, you know, we do things together, and that's how it works.
So you're thinking, okay, how are you going to implement this? Was there a point in the process where you did think, you know what, they do get this, they do understand Buckland Development are going to be our guys to deliver exactly the vision that we have as much as they do?
I think when I started to see some of the CGIs and the absolute quality that was being looked at in terms of the homes, the centre of the community and what it is they were looking to do, I started to get quite excited about it. That this wasn't just going to be another big housing estate. You know, this is going to be something really special. And we have this really unusual combination of landowners who are then developers, Buckland interviewing for builders and not going for all the big names that I could mention, but I won't, but going for ones that I've actually heard of. Family companies. I'd heard of Thacum, but Fry and Pye, and then you look them up and you look at the quality of what they're doing and that they're joint ventures with Buckland. And I thought this is a really exciting concept coming, and I'm looking at things and and the architects who were on board and getting to meet them as well. And I thought, this is different from anything in my 30, what would have been then about 35 years as a local councillor, different from anything I've ever seen before in terms of building community.
I think possibly as well, every person that I've sat opposite as part of this podcast for Series 1 has some kind of personal connection to the region, which adds that sprinkle or layer of care and consideration. Does that bring you immense pride as well?
It really does. I suppose when you get towards the end of your political career, maybe you start to look at what's the legacy, what's changed, and hopefully in many cases for the better. And something that would be really good to see is something of the quality of Welborne being developed over the next quarter of a century, probably, for the building to all take place, and a model that can be rolled out nationally. This is a proving ground. We've had a sort of first phase of a proving ground at Poundbury, where we've been able to see how that has developed, and we've seen the good and we've seen the bad. And I think we're going to learn from all of that, and we're going to see the best here, and then that model being able to be rolled out nationally, or if not internationally.
And when you talk about legacy, are there other elements of the Welborne project that you're really excited about? If we talk about, it could be the apprenticeship and training opportunities, it could be the employment opportunities that are going to last in the region, or the infrastructure. There's talk still, I understand, about a railway station coming to Welborne. Are there any that are particularly at the forefront for you that you hope pull through and we see the benefits
all of them. But one really challenging piece of infrastructure is a new motorway junction. And that has plagued me and the Borough Council and the County Council and Buckland throughout in terms of getting the funding in place. I have been to Westminster many times with meeting various secretaries of state, civil servants, etc., and being able to get, at the end, £42 million grant to Fareham Borough Council, which we were able to passport to Hampshire County Council and see the motorway junction actually commissioned. It's a project worth probably around £80 million plus, and now a possibility of starting it. And even the project itself, just that, is so exciting because it's going to have an underpass under the motorway. You imagine closing one of the country's most busy motorways, and it's going to be done, we hope maybe next year over the Christmas period for a week, and then going to be pushing this massive box, digging literally across the motorway, closing the motorway, and this huge box pushed into place, covered up, open. The time lapse of that is going to be so exciting to watch when it's happened. So that's just one part of it. The amount of green space which is going to be in Welborne, something like half of the development is going to be green, and people are going to be able to access it. Yes, it's 1,000 acres of green at the moment, but of course it's not publicly accessible generally. There's some paths across it, so that's going to be good. School, the secondary school, I'd love to see a through flow school, which will be infant, junior, secondary, all through, and I know that's shared with Buckland as well, so hopefully that will happen. So the schools, I'm hoping the church will become involved. Healthcare facilities, desperately important, very hard discussions on that to make it happen, and transport generally, and the railway station. That's something, I had a chance meeting I had with some people from Railtrack who are doing work at Fareham railway station, putting in some new tracking, and I said, it'd be great to do something at Welborne, it's always been rebuffed. They said, no, it doesn't have to be, we'll come and see you. So we then commissioned a study, it showed that it's viable. Government's now given us a bit of money to do some more work on that, and we're making sure that all of the decisions made at Welborne, none of them will prejudice the possible future delivery of a railway station, which is brilliant.
And you mentioned the initial 42 million investment from the government for the motorway improvements, and it sounds like there's potential for a whole lot more in this region. Just to clarify, do you feel that that investment would happen without the Welborne project?
Absolutely not. And it's as simple as that. We need the improvement made. Quite literally, it's a busy motorway. It's obviously enlarged the running area with the smart motorway project. But at the moment, everything that wants to get into what will be Welborne or get to Wickham, you have to come along from the west, come along past junction 10 to junction 11, double back, and vice versa the other way. Well, that's crazy. We're going to be taking off hundreds of thousands of vehicle movements off, because they're not going to be doing this doubling back each way. So it's definitely needed. It's needed regionally, but it wouldn't happen if it wasn't for Welborne.
Well, Seán, just to end, I know you're due to retire. I can feel your enthusiasm for the Welborne project, and I know that you want to make it part of the legacy of this region, perhaps the legacy for yourself as well. But does this positivity extend amongst your fellow councillors and local politicians?
Yes, it does now, and even among generally not just the Conservatives, but the opposition as well, who opposed us every step of the way. You don't always have to do that as an opposition, but they did. And they're with us now as well, and I think that's really good. And I am coming to the end. I always have in mind an old saying that all political careers end in failure. I was determined that mine wouldn't, and I always said I will choose when I finish. And 3 years ago, I had the discussion with my family. It was a family decision that 2021 would be the last time I stood for Hampshire County Council. And that 2022 would be my last election for Fareham Borough Council. And so that decision was made. I revealed it just a few weeks ago because, of course, we're choosing candidates, and it couldn't be, is he or isn't he, or why haven't we got a candidate in his ward? So I had to say that that was the case. But it'll be huge to finish, but hopefully it's wonderful to see that you've left something reasonable behind as well.
I'm sure your personal public service is not finished with your retirement anyway. Councillor Seán Woodward, it's been a pleasure to catch up with you here as part of the Welborne podcast. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And to stay in touch with all updates and developments on the Welborne project, don't forget that you can head over to the website at welborne.co.uk, and also make sure you follow us across the socials for more immediate updates courtesy of Welborne UK.